Dominion aside, we do have some more information from SHOT Show. I alluded to this earlier in the interview with Gabby Hoffman, but there was one fairly interesting development that we wrote up pertaining to smart guns, right? So the smart guns have sort of been around for a while now, since the late 90s, this concept of using technology to implement personalized locks on firearms using either biometric readers, fingerprint readers and the like, or RFID tags to ensure that only the authorized user is able to actually fire the gun. But now that interest in this has sort of exploded over the last couple of weeks because you have a couple of new companies that are supposedly coming to market with an actual product soon. And I went and interviewed the founder of one of them at SHOT Show because they were there at the industry trade show, which is interesting in and of itself, that you saw a smart gun company at SHOT Show this year. And the company is called Smart Guns with a Z, sort of aptly named group, and they have an RFID based locking mechanism integrated into a 1911 pistol design. And so I went and spoke with the founder to get their point of view on what exactly the future of this market should be, especially given the political considerations around these devices, because in the United States in particular, you've had a lot of controversy because gun control activists have, for really decades now, tried to mandate this technology in exclusion of traditional firearms. You've seen the Clinton administration made a deal. I think you talked about this in a piece that you wrote as well, examining some of the history of smart guns and what advocates need to do in order to win over gun owners on this topic, right? But this started back in the Clinton administration, right?
Yeah. So in the year 2000, the Clinton administration came to an agreement with the company Smith & Wesson, which everyone's familiar with, one of the biggest gun manufacturers in the country. Basically, kind of to put a stop to a lot of the liability lawsuits that were going on at the time, because this was pre the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. So gun manufacturers were subject to a lot of liability lawsuits for, misuse of their guns in crime and so on. So the Clinton administration came to an agreement with Smith & Wesson, and part of that agreement stipulated that a certain percentage of all revenue that the company had moving forward would go to developing smart gun technology. And then within 3 years, their entire stock of what they would sell would have to be smart guns. So these so-called personalized guns, which, as we know, created a massive backlash. The NRA led a huge boycott campaign against Smith & Wesson. They basically went bankrupt, and they were bought out by another company as a result, and they have since ceased that push. They
backpedaled very quickly from that after the incredible amount of backlash they obtained. But the idea of mandating smart guns did not die there. You had New Jersey a couple of years later in 2002 pass a law that said once any smart gun was available on the market anywhere in the United States, that it would be the only kind of gun that New Jersey gun dealers could sell. And that actually created the huge disincentive for making these guns at all, and has kept them off the market. I think primarily the sort of specter of that law basically killed development of these guns over the past 20 years. And it was only recently that they repealed that law, or they didn't repeal it, they modified it, right? They what did they do?
Yeah, in 2019, Governor Phil Murphy signed into law basically amending that act, where it no longer would mandate that all guns be smart guns. But once a viable smart gun that was approved by the state's attorney general came to market, then every gun dealer in the state would have to, one, sell the gun, and two, advertise it and list its features prominently in their stores, essentially. Mandating that they
So
push
it's still
the product.
basically a mandate. It's a little less aggressive than the previous one, but it's still something that the industry is opposed to very strongly because they don't want to be forced to sell these guns if they're not popular enough. And one of the other reasons that's kept these guns from really catching on here, and interestingly enough, like you could see sort of the politics in the United States is a big impediment to the development of these guns, but you don't really see these in other countries either, even countries that that are inclined to pass very strict gun laws like England or Australia. You don't see smart guns over there either. So perhaps it's not just the political situation here that's kept them out of the country, but also a lot of the concerns surrounding their reliability. Because, these new smart gun companies, including Smart Guns, which I spoke to the co-founder, Tom Holland, there, and he said that the New Jersey law was disastrous and that their company just wants to offer a competing option to traditional firearms. They're not trying to replace them. They just want to make this available as an option for consumers and let the consumers decide. And you've also seen similar comments from the co-founder of Lodestar, which is another company developing a smart gun that's based on biometric technology. And it's interesting to see some of the reliability questions around these guns persist even today. It's sort of, on the one hand, it's kind of obvious, right? Because if anyone who has a smartphone has used biometric locks hundreds of times a day on their phone, because most use a thumbprint reader or face scanner or whatever technology to let you into your phone. And the issue there is that everyone knows that they're not 100% reliable. You can commonly have to put your thumb on the fingerprint reader several times before it actually reads your fingerprint. And if they're wet, or if your thumb is dirty in some way, they might not read it at all. And so these are obviously huge problems when you're talking about integrating them into a gun that you might have to use in a life and death situation, right?
Not only, in adverse conditions where your hand might be wet or dirty, but like you said, in a life and death situation, having the presence of mind and the dexterity to perfectly line your finger up on a biometric scanner, it's a tough proposition when it's a really serious situation. So that obviously gives a lot of gun owners who might be in the market for a gun in that scenario some trepidation.
Right. But here's what Tom Holland told me. This is a quote directly from him. "We believe there are consumers out there, both in law enforcement and civilians, that are going to welcome us with open arms. We're just providing an option." And so he was adamant about this idea that they're not trying to mandate this technology, that they have scenarios where they believe both law enforcement and civilians could be interested in this sort of technology. And to be fair here, biometric safes and RFID safes and magnetic safes have existed for quite a while on the open market, and people will use them commonly to store their firearms. Now, they have some of the same problems. Obviously, if you're using a thumbprint reader safe to get to your gun, you're going to encounter the same exact issues as if you had that biometric lock integrated into the gun itself. And so there probably is some market for this among some people who would rather have that technology just integrated into the gun itself and skip that second layer, or maybe they want an extra layer of protection on top of it. Obviously, one of the examples Holland gave me was people with children as sort of an extra layer of precaution. They might want to have a lock like this integrated into the gun itself. In this case, with smart guns, they're using an RFID reader. It has a ring that you have to wear if you want to use it. That's what emits the radio frequency that the gun's internal components read in order to unlock it. Of course, it's also battery powered, so the battery's integrated into the bottom plate of the magazines. And so, there's another problem with it, is that you have to recharge these devices for them to continually work, of course. And so if your battery is dead on your the gun, it won't work is an obvious reliability problem. But there are people who might be interested in this anyway, even with all those sort of drawbacks, because of the added layer of security that these things offer. And then he also identified some scenarios where police may be interested in them. He said, he told me this, a quote from him: "We have identified specific use cases or situations where law enforcement has said we see value in smart technology. We're not trying to replace a force's Glocks or SIGs or Berettas, but there are some specific instances, like, say, for prisoner transport situations, undercover agents work, security checkpoint, crowd control. In all three of those situations, you're going to either see a prisoner or somebody purposely trying to grab a weapon away from an officer or a third-party transporter and then turn and use that gun against those folks." So, those are the scenarios that they envision. And they said they have a couple of law enforcement agencies that have already ordered guns, and they're going to start shipping them units next month.
That portion, I think, is big. I don't think he's disclosed yet which agencies are using or experimenting with these smart guns, but I think that's a lot of source of the skepticism with a lot of gun proponents, is the fact that in the past, law enforcement was exempt from these potential mandates for smart guns.
Yeah.
And
he's
to see
actually,
law enforcement
he's actually
agencies,
kind of, so he's actually kind of suggesting that they're going to use law enforcement to validate the concept here. He told me specifically, right, quote, law enforcement is only a way that will, law enforcement is also a way that will validate to our consumer market, because we've got purchases from them already. They're doing a proprietary evaluation, giving us feedback that we use to harden our product before we ship it out. It also tells consumers that, hey, if law enforcement feels comfortable enough with this technology, it's good enough for me too. So you can see they're kind of using law enforcement as a test case in this scenario. I'd be interested to know if, how many law enforcement officers are going to be willing to be the sort of test case for this stuff, given that they are carrying their guns specifically for safety purposes instead of, target shooting or right, something along those lines that's less high risk. But they're supposed to be shipping out products next month, and then it'll be available for sale to consumers in April, they told me. So, I guess it's here, at least in theory. I mean, we'll have to see. They had a prototype there, but it wasn't a working prototype, and they didn't let me handle it. So I can't really give any insight as to whether or not it actually works as advertised yet. They said they're going to post a demo to their website next month that demonstrates how it works, but that still remains to be seen. I think wasn't there a video of the other company, Lodestar? Wasn't there an issue with the video that they put out?
Yeah, there was a video on Twitter circulating where the Lodestar was doing a demo in front of their shareholders. It was supposed to be a 2-round live fire demonstration, and it appeared that after the first shot, the demonstrator got a dead trigger. It's tough to say for sure because the video abruptly ends, but it looked like he wasn't able to get the second shot off, so that might put a little bit of a seed of doubt in some people's minds that maybe the kinks aren't worked out just yet.
Yeah, it did look that way from when I watched that video too, which is not that's not good. I mean, that's not going to help people gain confidence in your technology. And so we'll have to see where these things go. I mean, I'm as skeptical as anyone else, I think, about how well these will work and how many people will actually want them. But I don't think it's going to be nobody, and really, to me, the bigger question here is the politics of it. Will people try to mandate this? I mean, the president himself on his own campaign website, Joe Biden said that he wants all guns to be smart guns. He wants those to be the only guns that are legal in the United States. He said that a number of times. So it's not like this is a fringe idea that these guns, once they're available, some politicians will try to mandate them as the only guns you can own. And I think, given the reliability concerns we have still today, it's going to be a big issue moving forward. Once these come to market. And it seems like that day is heading here soon.